We're starting with our work session. We've got a couple items on the work session. We'll start with the retaining wall material text amendment. Yeah, you don't look like Ginger so tall.
Yes, I've changed drastically. Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time to discuss retaining walls. So before you for consideration is whether an alternative type of retaining wall material should be added to our retaining wall material allowance. No action is required tonight, of course, but if desired, staff will formulate a text amendment for the June 18 council meeting for your future consideration. Next slide. Oh, I have the clicker. That's great. So we see here a very preliminary text to consider. Currently, the code reads a little bit more like the first half of that first paragraph. So the remainder of those paragraphs is loosely trying to incorporate some of this alternative material that we are talking about. We're looking for your direction on whether to consider these alternatives to masonry and wood materials that are already allowed. In certain instances, determined by city staff depending on their impacts and where they're placed. The primary alternative being considered is ultimately a vegetative evergreen wall that's usually constructed with welded wire, which is of course screened by the vegetation. So you have here on the left, you have a fern. On the right, you see some ivy there. So those are examples of what you might find on these types of welded wire retaining walls. And evergreen, it's important. That's one thing that would be required of anyone who might use these walls, is that they are green all year. Here's some other examples. At least on the left, you have a type of moss being utilized. And on the right, just the actual welded wire that is how these things stay together, draw their strength. That's really it. So, at your direction.
All right, I'm going to recognize the resident retaining wall expert on my right.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for presenting this. As background, this came up about a month ago. Councilman DeJulia and I were called to a site where it was one of those situations where they got stuck because the quality of the backfill they were using to replace the retaining wall that was in place wasn't suitable for the concrete block facings, which is what we offer. And we as a city don't offer alternative facing elements. And again, this is a text amendment dealing with the facing element, not the structural stability of the wall mass itself, but the facing elements. And so the contractor said, if I could put a vegetated face on here, I could save the contract. It could save the development it was $50,000 or $60,000, but it's not even. It can't even be considered the way our code is currently written. So right. Staff got together, and I thank you guys for doing this. Put this together. This is a pretty standard vegetated option in the industry, and so these are good examples. I think this is a good step in bringing alternatives forward. And they're not agreed to by rote. They've literally got to go through staff's review. So if somebody comes up with a new harebrained system that either doesn't look good or isn't stable, you have the right to turn it down. But if it's genuinely one of these situations where they don't need the beautiful architectural panel, they can live with a vegetated face, save some money, and not really impact the aesthetics, which is another part of this. You don't want these vegetated walls facing an area where people see it all the time, because when the vegetation grows, a lot of times it's pretty wild and woolly. So what you want the vegetation to grow and be healthy. So there are going to be some restrictions on when this can be used, but at least it's an option now. So my suggestion, my recommendation is we pursue this and have it run through the system and hopefully get it approved by all and gives our contractors some alternatives going forward.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep. Anybody else? Mr. DiGiulio.
You know, when John and I went out and spoke with the contractors, and it happens to be where I live, so let me just put that out there. But the contractor was telling us how superior these vegetative walls are for stormwater. And I just wanted to get your opinion on it, because, you know, one of the problems we have in abundance here in Sandy Springs is stormwater, especially down in where I'm in my district, because it's the older part of Sandy Springs. There's tremendous stormwater problems down there, and also Nancy Creek runs through there, etc. What's your opinion about this with stormwater?
Well, I'm not an engineer, but anytime you replace concrete with vegetation, the chances of that concrete absorbing that water versus the vegetation are much different, much lower. So yeah, anytime you have vegetation as the face or a part of the system, that's always an improvement to block wall or concrete with some sort of face on it. Certainly.
I'm much in favor of this also.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, we look forward to you bringing it back to us. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, next item is the ARC Transportation Improvement Program solicitation. I guess we want to discuss the addition of some projects. Mr. Martin.
All right, Mayor and Council, good evening. Tonight, we do have the Atlanta Regional Commission's Transportation Improvement Program solicitation in front of you. We'd like to get your consensus tonight on project recommendations for this upcoming solicitation period. Solicitation opened March 4th of this year, and city project applications are due by May the 6th of this year. Program eligibility for projects, we're programming for funds that are needed in 2025 through 2027 of fiscal years, with some possible funding available in FY 2028. Request of greater than $2 million for current TIP projects or new phases. First, the evaluation criteria: mobility and access, equity, safety, and resiliency. And Mayor, you cited a couple of weeks ago in communication on this that ARC has now modified their criteria for this current call. And to that end, the updated criteria also reflect ARC priorities for project readiness, safety, collaboration with state and regional partners. In this particular call, no planning studies, etc. It's only, ARC will only be funding infrastructure projects. And then projects, large roadway projects with emissions impacts will undergo additional safety and emission analyses.
And Marty, these are being driven by federal requirements. These aren't ARC requirements. This is part of the FHWA and USDOT.
Yes, sir. For all federal funds, of course, Atlanta Regional Commission being our metropolitan planning organization, if we're going to pursue transportation federal funds, we go through ARC in order to obtain those. And this, along with the prioritization process, projects with at least one phase already in the TIP. So those projects where we're already receiving monies, we have a project number, et cetera, have top priority. And then projects that would need additional funding in earlier fiscal years, again, back to that, if we need monies greater than $2 million for a project, those also receive priority. And those in our the jurisdictions, we're required to as well prioritize our submission. So if we submit multiple requests for federal funding under this call, we need to give a priority order to the ARC as we make that submission. All that said, our review of our current programs with requirements and those prioritization considerations we just discussed. In front of you is the prioritized recommended list of priority projects for this year's 2024 TIP solicitation request. At the top of the list, the project that requires by far the most funds right now in our estimation that we're bidding currently, phases 1, et cetera, is Path 400 Trail Extension. If you recollect from our discussion with you a few months ago on the RAISE grant application for this project, we're short some $17 million for this project right now. We're not able to bid the entirety of the project right now because of the amount of funding available to us. So this is yet another effort on our part to secure those future years' federal funding to complete the Path 400 Trail project within the city of Sandy Springs.
Can you turn your mic on?
I think we've got it. I'm going to get to, if I could, Councilwoman, I've got individual slides. Let me see if I cover it there. Just a moment. Roswell Road North End Boulevard. We were very successful with an early phase request for design dollars for that project. We did have some forecasting for the right-of-way required, still not yet in design. If you recollect, a couple of weeks ago, I brought before you a request or an authorization letter so that the city could manage its own federal design engineer acquisition process. So with that now in process, we'll hope to make an award recommendation not in the not too distant future to begin design on the project. But this would seek the right-of-way funds in a future year. 27, I believe, is what we're asking for, to advance the project and put a marker out there. Roberts Drive Side Path, Phase 1, we're seeking design dollars to support that project. We do have some design funds in T-SPLOS Tier 1 to support that project right now. We would look to take some of those design funds and hopefully potentially leverage those funds against federal dollars to get design started. Hammond Drive between Roswell Road and Boylston Drive. This would be the next phase of the Hammond Drive corridor widening project, that important link between Roswell Road and the intersection of Boylston and Hammond to the very west end of the project. And then finally, Roswell Road Safety Project from Cliffwood Carpenter to Hammond Drive. We're looking for design funds. This project, if you recollect, out of the very lengthy and prioritized list of access management projects we discussed during the access management planning phase, this was the top priority project, not yet underway within the access management program. And the coincidence of this project with the Hammond Drive Phase 1 project seems like, or Phase 2 project, seems like a good synergy in this case. So if I could, I'll go into a little more detail on the projects here. All right, so first, Path 400 Trail Extension. Councilwoman, I don't have the exact measurement for the distance of the trail in front of me, but I can tell you that for what we have out for bid right now for Path 400 is the portion of the Path 400 trail up to Windsor Parkway from the city limits and a little bit beyond, reaching down in Atlanta, and then down from 285-400, all phases considered that we can bid right now, down to Ridgeview Middle School. So it's that portion defined as that portion of the path between Windsor Parkway and Ridgeview Middle School, which is what we're seeking the $14 million city match of $3 million to pursue in this particular case, which is the same segment, same dollars we're pursuing with the RAISE grant as well right now. Look for all sources to potentially support this project. Priority 2 recommendation is right-of-way acquisition support to the North End Boulevard project, which we hope to award and then begin design on soon. We've already had the good fortune, thus we're in the tip already, to have received design funds from the ARC for this project. We have a FN number in this case. We can begin environmental processes up front, so it gives us the opportunity to build against the TIP or the T-SPLOS funds we already have allocated against the project, again, using those dollars to leverage the larger North End, potentially larger North End Boulevard project as it advances. Roberts Drive Side Path. We've just received a concept report on the project. Our consultant has looked at options, construction cost, recommendations on phasing, et cetera, to go along. And we'd like to get in front of you, maybe in another session, and talk to you more about that study and what the side path recommends. But in this case, we'd like to pursue getting some design funds now to begin the design process and get this project as well enrolled in the environmental processes, et cetera, to make this project eligible for future federal funding. If you notice on this graphic in front of you, Phase 1, as recommended, would bring the side path from Dunwoody Place up Roberts Drive to, if you see the red line on the graphic there, that's the portion that GDOT has constructed now for the city as a part of the bridge replacement and widening project for Georgia 400 managed lanes. So side path now exists at that location that this proposed side path would tie into, and then the remainder, that segment up to the right-hand side of the image in front of you, would create connectivity across National Park Service frontage to access the park. Phase 2 would be a future years not yet programmed. Priority 4 is recommended right now would be the next phase of Hammond Drive corridor widening project, picking the project up at Boylston Drive, where the new 4-lane section begins, along with the Boylston at Hammond intersection improvement project, and extending the work to the west on Hammond Drive toward Roswell Road, and then the project would actually reach slightly beyond Roswell Road to handle lane transitions, et cetera, to create the turn lanes required with this project. Proposed match for this particular project would be, we would look at future T-SPLOST, would be the recommendation to Mayor and Council tonight. So we look at T-SPLOST next, 26 in this case would be the vote, with next T-SPLOST, as creating the local match for this particular project, with the remainder of the design funds being sought via federal dollars. And then the other project we would look at next T-SPLOST to potentially provide the local match support for, in this case, would be the Roswell Road Drive safety project from Hammond down to Cliftwood. The timing would be opportune for this project, we believe. We'd consider medians, additional turn lanes. If you recollect from some of the early studies, there's even discussion and consideration of signalization somewhere between Cliftwood and Hammond Drive to ease congestion and improve accessibility to the commercial parcels on both sides of Roswell Road here, especially with the consideration that the major parcel, commercial parcel to the west, is now in stages and phases redeveloping. This would again seem like a good time to consider this project, which was our highest project access management project, and as well tie on to the I-285 at Roswell Road study that GDOT's shortly beginning, that we've already contributed dollars to as well. So there's a synergy here that we think is important that maybe we ought to consider in this TIP application. Those are our 5 projects in priority order that we're recommending to you. The next steps with this TIP application call would be to finalize this list with you all, then commit to the local support. We intend to bring each of these items back to you on April 16th council meeting so that we have a resolution committing the local fund match to the projects. And then we would submit the project applications right after that, along with the resolutions and council approval to the ARC by May the 6th, May 6th. Mayor and Council, with that, any questions?
All right, any questions? Ms. Rochelle, then Ms. Mueller.
What are the chances of us getting all 5 of those approved? And how much did we get last year?
Now I'm going to ask Kristen Westcott, please, Kristen. So you knew I would. You've got the history here. So, but this is I think 2 years ago was our last call, correct?
Yeah, so we actually haven't sought to get this many projects into the TIP for quite some time. And they've only been doing a call every other year.
Okay.
And I think the last time they had the call for projects, we advanced that Roswell Road, North Boulevard, and that was our only project. And they didn't even we asked actually for the entirety of that project at the time, and they only gave us a portion to get it started on design. So, yeah.
Okay.
So it is a big ask, actually.
Okay.
We have 2 existing projects, and then we've added 3 new projects to consider. But, there's an advantage there to introducing these projects to ARC so that maybe if we're not successful this time, they will consider it in the future. So
if we ask for 1 through 5 and they give us $4 million, do we put $4 million towards 1, or do they go to number 2? And
that's why we have to submit the priorities. So And they will have conversations with staff if they have questions about our applications, or they say, hey, Sandy Springs, we have this much money for you. Do you want it all in project one, or do you want us to have it across 5 projects?
And
So
when will we find out when we get the money? You said it.
they usually give us a time later in the year. I think it's in the fall.
It'll be the end
but,
of the year.
But
They gotta take
it
it through their
sometimes ends
process.
up, pushing to December.
It has to be approved by the ARC board, which I'm.
It's a long approval process. So they have to look at our applications in amongst every other jurisdiction that submits to the MPO.
It's a very cumbersome, difficult, long process.
And they also have to balance the projects all against all the different federal funding programs, whether it's congestion mitigation or surface transportation or transportation enhancements, which a lot of people have known before is, to fund bicycle and pedestrian projects. So they try to match up all the projects with the sources of funding and all of that. So, and balance it across the region. So
It's a challenge, and right now the focus at ARC, and this is largely driven by the federal requirements, they're looking at, rather than projects that affect just Sandy Springs, they want to see projects that affect Dunwoody, Sandy Springs, Roswell, Brookhaven, and the entire region. And so that's why these projects have been chosen, because Hammond clearly connects Dunwoody and the perimeter market over into Cobb County. It's a major thoroughfare through there. All of these fit within the box that ARC has drawn. So if you don't fit them within the box, you're not going to get them. And if you do fit them within the box, you're still not guaranteed to get them.
And in the case of these projects, we did have the opportunity with a municipal government-focused open house last week to vet these projects with the ARC staff to confirm our assumptions on what we needed to apply for, et cetera. So, we've begun that process of at least getting ARC visibility on projects that are on our mind for future years. Now, clearly, Path 400 was no surprise to them. They know we want the money. They know that they'll get us money as they can. We're going to keep pursuing all sources as we can to try to get that.
And the advantage of that one is because it connects into the trail system in the city of Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
It's a regional project with regional impact. Ms. Mueller.
So Marty, a question. So on these projects, is there somewhere where if the public wanted to go find more information about these projects, are they somewhere on the website? Some of them I recognize, and some I'm not so
yes,
sure of.
and for instance, Priority 5 here. I don't know what we have published or advertised right now,
Okay.
other than the access management study with the recommended implementation plan in the back of it.
Okay.
So that's where we've extracted this project from to begin the process with it. Hammond Drive widening, of course, I think it's pretty well publicized throughout. We've got the early concept study work that talked about the entire corridor, and then the later work that talks about the focused area that we're expending the T-SPLOST funds on right now.
And then that particular project that you're speaking of, would that be done after the Boylston or after the widening? From Boylston to Roswell Road, what's the order?
So we would anticipate the design, we're asking for design dollars in FY27. So this would be on the heels of completing the intersection and construction of the 4-lane section between Boylston and Glen Ridge. We would begin design,
Okay.
and then
So it's
so
after.
that we could posture this project to pick up some portion. Our challenge, for instance, if you recollect our build with the T-SPLOST 2021 program, is if we tried to execute the entirety of the Hammond project back then, it would have been the entirety of the T-SPLOST program, to a little bit of an exaggeration. So we're trying to look for some companion fund sources here. We think we're now in a place where we can be eligible for funds for that particular project, talking about, Hammond widening. So that timing would begin design 27. We're looking at 26 for the T-SPLOST matching funds, or the vote in 26. Then collections in 27, which would glove in pretty well with it.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure the order. So the order is the widening, the intersection realignment.
Intersection,
the big,
widening,
The big widening, and then this project.
phase next.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? Dr. Kelly?
All right. I just wanted to get some clarification on how, so projects that are currently funded by this program, and it's only like a couple, they have a special project number? Like
It depends on the particular fund source. So, for instance, Path 400 Trail Extension and Roswell Road North End Boulevard, those funds are being administered and the funds are being provided through the Georgia Department of Transportation. So we'll have particular project numbers. We'll get a GDOT and have a GDOT PI number, project identification number, with each of those projects. And that helps us, for one, begin the coordination on National Environmental Policy Act coordination that's needed early on in the project, et cetera. Project not on this list, because we didn't need the kinds of monies that this program, greater than $2 million, we need a little bit more money that we'll pursue for Project T19, our Roswell Road Access to Transit Project, 285, or Roswell Road south of 285. It doesn't have PI numbers and FN numbers because it's FTA Flex Fund. So it went over, those dollars went through ARC to MARTA, and then we got those dollars via a different process. Different numbers, different system, didn't have quite the similar logistics required to render the project when all said and done. So a couple of different sources ARC can help us with there. In this particular case, these would all anticipated be administered through the Georgia Department of Transportation.
Okay. Because I'm not just curious about how a member of the public could maybe keep track of, the projects that are currently funded.
All right, with those, GDOT maintains a pretty robust website for
Okay.
PI numbers.
Well, and you can also go to the ARC website and see the whole tip.
Okay.
It's available on a spreadsheet, and you can go down and go down to where Sandy Springs is, and it'll list all the projects in Sandy Springs and what funding mechanism they're in and all that sort of information.
So at the bottom of this slide, on the right-hand side, the
That's the
atlantaregional.org /tip, so they have, that will pull up every project in the entire region
Zero in
beyond Sandy
I
Springs.
mean, there's
So
literally
everything,
hundreds of projects on
Right.
that list.
Yeah,
You'll have to go
and-
find Sandy Springs to find ours.
I'm sure it's user-friendly and you could filter.
you
I
can
hope.
filter across
Fingers
everything.
crossed.
I can figure it out, so anybody else can.
Okay.
And FN stands for Fulton North. They had to split because Fulton is such a big county, Fulton North, and FS is Fulton South. But there's an abbreviation, like DeKalb is DK, so that, and then
That
you can look
helps.
up by sponsor. So anything with Sandy Springs.
Okay. Appreciate that. Another question, number related. The North End Boulevard project, are we asking for money because we're projecting that there's going to be a shortage, or is it?
We have not yet, we've not yet awarded design. So back to my earlier comment, we just, with that paperwork we completed on behalf of GDOT a couple of weeks ago, we can now complete our design award process and begin design. That's based on our scoping studies we did, and we did a earlier funded scoping study. So, and don't let me throw to me, we came up with estimates for design, we came up with estimates for construction and right-of-way acquisition as a part of that earlier scoping. We now have a forecasted amount for right-of-way. And of course, our experience has been with pretty much all of our T-SPLOST projects, we've experienced cost growth across the spectrum of projects. So we're asking for monies now to assist in right-of-way acquisition in the future, to try to get that request for monies into the program with the Georgia Department of Transportation.
Right, because we're expecting to collect, I think, around $9 million in T-SPLOST 2.
Correct. Well,
Uh,
yeah,
for
correct. Yes,
the Roswell.
correct.
But we may need.
We think we believe, based on the scoping study, we're going to need more money than that. So we're asking for help where we can get it now in the interest of being able to advance that project timely.
Okay. Last question. Is it customary to use future T-Splosh for matching? Like T-Splosh that hasn't even been approved or anything? I mean, I noticed you mentioned that. You said, when you said future
We think,
T-Splosh.
and I think, Kristen, we reviewed the language that ARC gave us some model language on tip or local funding matches. We believe we're on good ground with indicating that as we gain those funds in that particular year of requested
Right.
funds, we believe we'll have the monies available to do that. So there's a challenge there with binding a future council against et cetera. So you can always choose in the future not to take the money too as well if that decision comes. So
Or find a different source for the match. I mean,
Right.
we have that. We're allowed that.
if we want to pursue as well.
And
So-
there's a little bit of, some risk because those funds have to be voted on in a referendum. So not only does the future council have to be involved, but the voters have to approve those funds. But for planning purposes, which is what this is about, you anticipate you'll have those, and if you don't end up with them, then you have to start making adjustments.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any others? All right, we'll be voting on this in 2 weeks. So if you've got any questions that come up between now and then, please make sure you get them answered. That concludes our work session, except for the discussion items. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. One is immediate. Tonight, we're expecting a lot of bad weather in 3 ways. Please, everybody, monitor the weather overnight, because the most dangerous time for storms is when it's dark and you're asleep and you can't hear what's going on, and don't put your phone on do not disturb or on silent mode, so that if there are alerts that go out, your phone will wake you. It's very important that everybody be vigilant tonight. The department, the first responders, Public Works, ready to deal with whatever may be thrown our way. But this is something that we thought was going to go north of us, but now the latest projections show it's coming right over us. So we've got to be prepared. Make sure you follow social media, follow the weather reports, and let's everybody help keep everybody informed. Secondly, unfortunately, bad news, talking about money. I got a notice today from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources that our application for the Springway grant didn't make it. So we didn't get those funds. So, that's what we're doing here, was we're putting it out there, hoping we get funds, but there's no guarantee that we'll get it. Anybody else have anything, work session item? All right, with that, we'll close the work session. I'd like to call the order the meeting of the Sandy Springs City Council order for Tuesday, April 2nd. Will the city clerk please make the announcements and call the roll?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First, I would like to remind those in attendance, please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices at this time. Individuals who would like to provide a public comment at a city council meeting are required to complete and submit public comment cards in advance of the meetings. Public comment cards are available online and at the chamber entrance. Those providing public comment may be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on their single chosen topic. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Rusty Paul, Councilmember John Paulson, Councilmember Melody Kelly, Councilmember Melissa Mueller,
Here.
Councilmember Jody Rochelle, Councilmember Tibby DiGiulio, Councilmember Andy Bauman. Yes, we've received one public comment card this evening from Josh Marks, who I believe is in the audience.
Thank you, Mayor Paul, members of the City Council. My name is Josh Marks. I'm a 17-year resident of Sandy Springs, an environmental attorney, and president of Georgians for the Okefenokee, a statewide group fighting to protect the Okefenokee swamp. I'm here today to urge you to support the swamp's protection because it desperately needs it. Spanning more than 438,000 acres, the Okie is Georgia's greatest natural treasure. It is the largest blackwater swamp in North America and home to over 1,000 species of plants and animals, many of which are endangered. It's also the ancestral homeland of the Muskogee Creek Nation and was a literal human refuge to the African American community during Jim Crow. It's also the economic lifeblood of southeast Georgia, attracting over 800,000 visitors per year, including many from Sandy Springs, myself included, and generating over $90 million a year in revenue. For these reasons, the Okie is on track to be the first national wildlife refuge in the United States nominated for UNESCO World Heritage status, which is the Global Hall of Fame for wild places. Unfortunately, the Okefenokee is threatened by a proposed strip mine along its eastern boundary that will extract titanium for titanium dioxide, a whitener used in paint and food products. The filling in Oreo cookies is whitened by titanium dioxide. Scientific experts from UGA and around the country say that this mining will seriously damage the swamp by tripling the frequency of drought, increasing wildfires, and releasing pollutants into the water. Equally troubling is that the mining company proposing this, Twin Pines Minerals, has never built a mine before. It proposes technology never before used in this context and has a troubling history of noncompliance with environmental law. Twin Pines has applied for permits with the state of Georgia, and since 2019, over 160,000 comments have been submitted from residents in Sandy Springs, the rest of Georgia, and around the country, including from scientists, clergy, business owners, students, retirees, and more. A majority of the Georgia House of Representatives, including everyone from Sandy Springs, has supported legislation prohibiting mining in the area. There has been widespread national media attention to the issue, including in the Wall Street Journal and the Associated Press, and the publisher of the AJC within the last month has published 2 op-eds on the front page of the AJC, which to my knowledge has never been done before for an environmental issue. 14 other local governments have passed resolutions urging EPD to deny the permits for this mine, including the cities of Savannah, Albany, Waycross, and Brookhaven. Because this is an issue of serious concern for residents of Sandy Springs, we hope that the Sandy Springs City Council will become the 15th local government to pass a resolution. The comment period is open just for one more week until next Tuesday, April the 9th.
I need you to hurry up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I would be happy to work with you, Mayor, and the council in helping pass a resolution or sending a communication to the state encouraging them to protect the swamp by denying these permits. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Marks.
Mayor Pearl, can I ask him?
Sure.
Mr. Marks, Josh, thanks for coming here and really informing us. You've been reaching out to us for several months and been reading a lot more about this. Just briefly, can you tell us why this should be important to the community of Sandy Springs, which resides, a couple hundred miles from the Okefenokee?
Sure.
Why does this matter, and why should we be taking note?
Well, it's a great question. All 3 of my kids visited the swamp as part of their education. It is a very common trip for school kids of all ages in Georgia to go to the swamp, to be educated about the wildlife and the habitat. And if you've been to the Okefenokee, you can understand it's one of the most magical places on the planet. It's the largest national wildlife refuge east of the Mississippi. And as I said, it's now being considered to be a Hall of Fame member of the UNESCO World Heritage Site Club. And I just feel like because it's been so important to my kids and clergy leaders in Atlanta, in Sandy Springs, my rabbi, your rabbi, Rabbi Levenberg and Siegel, Rabbi.
Mr. Marks, I need you to.
I'm sorry. Anyway,
I know you're passionate, and you can go on like me. You can go on forever. And more importantly, the
Sure.
Okefenokee is home to Pogo.
Yes.
And Pogo's greatest line was, "We have met the enemy, and he is us."
You said it better than I did, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll give it all consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right. let's move on to
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. DiGiulio.
move approval of the meeting agenda for Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024.
Mr. DiGiulio moves approval of the meeting agenda. Is there a second? Moved by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Paulson, that we approve the meeting agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on the meeting agenda. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The meeting agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for Tuesday, April 2nd.
We have a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on approval of the consent agenda. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to public hearings, will the clerk please read the first item?
Agenda item number 2024-072. This is consideration of a resolution to approve the transmittal of the draft 2023-2024 capital improvements element annual update presented by Planning and Zoning Manager Michelle McIntosh Ross.
Ms. McIntosh Ross.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight is the public hearing and a request to approve a resolution that would authorize the city to transmit the draft capital improvement element, the CIE annual update, to the state and regional planning agencies for their review. The CIE annual update is a required element for cities that collect impact fees. It is a financial report of the collection and expenditures of the impact fee funds during the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. The CIE includes the impact fee project list of public improvement projects for each public facility category that are eligible for the impact fee funding, and those are public safety, parks and recreation, and transportation. So tonight we have provided the draft documents prepared in accordance with the development impact fees compliant requirements, and staff recommends that the Mayor and City Council approve this resolution so we can transmit the CIE report to ERC and DCA for their review.
All right, thank you, Ms. McIntosh Ross. Are there any public comments? We'll close the public hearing. This is required for us to continue to collect impact fees.
Correct.
If we don't do this, then that source of revenue goes away. So is there a motion on the resolution?
Mayor Paul?
Dr. Kelly.
I move approval of agenda item 2024-072, approval of the transmittal of the draft 2023-2024 capital improvements element annual update.
Have a motion by Dr. Kelly. Is there a second? Been moved by Dr. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2024-072, a resolution approving transmittal of the draft 2023-24 capital improvement element annual update. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2024-072, the resolution approving transmittal of the draft CIE annual update. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to the new business, will the clerk please read the first item?
Agenda item number 2024-073. This is a request to approve the appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 5674 Roswell Road and 5696 Roswell Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia, as it relates to the CDBG Roswell Road Sidewalk Project Phase 2 through the use of eminent domain. This is presented by City Attorney Danley.
Mr. Lee.
Mayor, Council, this is a request to allow the legal department to use eminent domain to gain possession of a piece of property that the staff has been working on for approximately 4 years to buy. We've changed the design 3 times. We've renegotiated with Georgia Power twice to relocate the power, and we've been unable to acquire it through, I almost said conventional means, those unconventional means. The big difference in this property is that it is located just inside 285 on the west side of Roswell Road, probably the most walked area of the city. And the sidewalk is badly needed, and this is part of the CDBG project, and most of the rest of it has been completed. This ask here is to be able to, by eminent domain, take fee simple title to just 2,143 square feet, which is valued at $128,000. And then a cost of cure, which is a number that has been generated from a third appraisal of $276,000, and other minor changes dealing with a sign and some other trade fixtures. Total of $423,000. There's a great hope that we can complete a negotiation, even though we've been trying for 4 years. This property owner, Roswell Road Development Partners, LLC, is a very sophisticated owner of property and developer of property. And so your approval of this doesn't necessarily mean it will be used, but we need to move the project along. As you know, there's a time limit on the use of the CDBG funds, and staff believes we're fast coming upon it. You have any questions?
All right, you've heard the report of the city attorney. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Baumann.
Move adoption of agenda item 2024-073, request to approve appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 5674 and 5696 Roswell Road.
Have a motion by Mr. Baumann. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Baumann, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve agenda item 2024-073, the appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 5674 and 5696 Roswell Road in Sandy Springs. Any discussion? Dr. Kelly.
I wanted to just make sure I understood the item. So we are not necessarily approving the actual expenditure itself, like that'll be another item once?
No.
Hopefully.
The way this works, Dr. Kelly, is that by approving this resolution tonight, you authorize me on behalf of the city to take this property by eminent domain. In the process of taking it, we have to pay into the court this independent appraised number of $423,000.
Oh, okay. So it is.
It is.
But if there's any changes in that cost, they have to come back to council.
Correct.
Okay, so I think that was the
Okay.
basis of your question. You're approving the expenditure of up to the money that was listed on the table. And if there's more money that's required based on a final agreement either between the city and the property owner, or the court orders it, then we may have to appropriate additional funds.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Baumann.
Dan, and maybe this is for Marty, are we able, once we do take this property, the project will stay on schedule? This is certainly, and I think you described it well, one of the most important and well-traveled pedestrian areas in the entire city. So we expect this meets the timetable to do that.
The staff believes if we move now to get the property, get
Right.
possession of the property, that they can let the bid, let the contract and award the bid and do the work.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. DiGiulio.
This is the property that starts at, this project that would be included in this is the Taqueria, I think is the name of it there. That deal, exactly. That deal has been struck. This property that is included in this resolution begins at the Love Shack and goes all the way to the Shell Station property on the west side of Roswell Road.
Mayor Paul.
All right, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you. So what is the current posture? This says at an impasse. Have they come back with a counter? Are they even talking to us after 4 years? What has led us to the point where we think we're done here negotiating?
The last response was they wanted to wait a couple of months and get a new roof on one of the buildings.
Okay. So they're not interested in any kind of negotiation at all.
Again, these are very sophisticated owners, and the staff, I could go on all night and tell you the things that they have done to accommodate this spot. And a lot of it has to do because it's a very intricate place. If you'll notice, there are two more curb cuts there than need to be there. And this project, this is another frustrating thing about it. If this property were to be redeveloped, and somebody would argue that the size of it may prevent it from ever being redeveloped, under our ordinances, the developer would have to do that which this project will do for him. And still, in two, we cannot get to a reasonable number. That we're about $1 million apart.
I have a question.
Ms. Rochelle.
What are you said it was the sign and what else? The cure items.
No, that's not the other. The site, on the resolution you have up there, the site improvements, maybe the striping. I don't know exactly, but there's a sign involved. I know that is a big sticking point.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2024-073, approving the appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 5674 Roswell Road and 5696 Roswell Road as it relates to the CDBG Roswell Road Sidewalk Project through the use of eminent domain. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
This is agenda item number 2024-74, a resolution authorizing the right of entry and access agreement between Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections and the City of Sandy Springs for the general primary and nonpartisan election advance voting, the November 2024 general election and subsequent runoff election advance voting, authorizing the mayor to execute the same for other purposes. This is presented by myself, City Clerk Raquel Gonzalez.
Ms. Gonzalez.
So, recently, the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections has reached out to the city seeing if we had a facility available for advance voting for the upcoming May election and November election and the subsequent runoffs. So typically, Fulton County hosts advance voting in the city at the North Fulton Annex, at the Dorothy Benson Center, as well as the Sandy Springs Library, but they've lost access to the Dorothy Benson Center for the upcoming election. So they asked if we had a space available. They've hosted an election before at Heritage back in 2020. They used Heritage as an election site, and we worked with PAC to see if there was an opportunity to host just advance voting there for these elections, and there appears to be some opportunity to do that. The schedule is available for them. The specific dates that they're looking to host advance voting at Heritage is April 29th through May 17th, 2024, and that's for the May 21st election. The October 15th through November 1st, and that's for the advance voting for the November 5th general election, and as well as the advance voting for any runoff election for that November election. So Heritage is not available for the June 18th, 2024 runoff should it be necessary from the May 21st election. So as is the agreement with Fulton County to use the Hammond Park Gymnasium as a polling site, the city's recommending that should the council approve, we not charge the county for use of Heritage. But because Heritage isn't used frequently, the county has agreed to pay for any janitorial services that would be required for their use throughout that period. So that's our recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, you've heard the report of the city clerk. What's the desire of council? Mr. Paulson.
Move approval of agenda item 2024-074, authorizing right of entry and access agreement between Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections and the City of Sandy Springs for the general primary and nonpartisan election advance voting, the November 2024 general election, and subsequent runoff election advance voting, authorizing the mayor to execute same and for any other purposes.
Have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2024-074, a resolution authorizing right of entry and access agreement between Fulton County Board of Registration's elections and the City of Sandy Springs for the elections coming up in 2024. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
Just to reiterate, Rocky, there's no cost to the city for us allowing this to happen?
No, any utilities that we would pay otherwise, that's,
Okay.
but otherwise, no.
You don't have to retrofit it or do anything to...
No.
Thank you.
Ms. Rochelle.
Eden, I just want to make sure each day I go by the library, are there going to be any issues with people going in and out of voting during that time
No,
with all
ma'am.
the construction?
We've already discussed it with the contractor, and they know that they will have to make sure that all of the entrances are open and available for the public to get in for voting.
Oh, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2024-074, a resolution authorizing right of entry and access agreement between Fulton County and City of Sandy Springs for general primary nonpartisan elections advance voting for the November 24th general election and subsequent runoff. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2024-075. This is consideration to approve a change order 2 to the existing contract with Reedwick LLC as it relates to the public safety fiber project and for the city manager to execute the same, presented by Public Works Director Marty Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor and council, good evening. Tonight I bring before you a recommendation to approve change order 2 to the existing contract with Reedwick LLC for the public safety fiber project. A little background, the city initially awarded this construction contract to Reedwick under ITB 23-048 for $135,390 in February 2023 to construct the public safety fiber project. That included the construction of a new fiber mini hub at the corner of Roswell Road and Morgan Falls Road. The new mini hub serves the city fiber optic communications serves as the city's fiber optic communications distribution hub for the north end of the city. If you recollect, we brought a change order 1 to you some time back. During the construction of that public safety fiber project, the contractor did encounter solid rock in some portions of Morgan Falls Road, and you approved at that time a change order in the amount of $39,098. With change order 1 for the additional work required to deal with the rock, additional jack and bore, etc. We now bring before you a recommendation for change order 2 to add a couple of other items to the work that we would ask that Reedwick perform for us. First is to connect the fiber from the mini hub cabinet, located again at Morgan Falls Road and Roswell Road, to the new fleet building now under construction at 8475 Roswell Road. We asked the contractor as well to conduct a fiber audit between Morgan Falls Mini Hub Cabinet and this facility, City Hall, 1 Galambos Way, to determine fiber allocations, where you address among that number of fiber pairs that are available to communicate between here and that fiber hub in parts north. As well, we asked the contractor to conduct a fiber audit between Morgan Falls Mini Hub Cabinet at Roswell Road, that same location, and GDOT's Hub Q on Roswell Road, State Route 400, to determine fiber allocations to better implement automated traffic signal performance measures project in cooperation and coordination with the Georgia Department of Transportation. This further enables as well integration with GDOT's traffic signal systems and our ability to share information. And then finally, a mini hub cabinet connection to public safety facility. This work order would add fiber optic jumpers, that physical connections from the fiber backbone out on Morgan Falls Road into the police building as it's constructed and finalized. Staff recommends that an additional 120 contract days are required to complete this work, in addition to the monies required of $49,635. To the question, why am I bringing a $49,000 change order to you tonight when it is more so about the additional time required of the contract, in this particular case at 120 calendar days. Given recent changes in review of policy on contract time extensions, we felt it most proper to bring the contract time extension as well to you for that. Otherwise, the $49,000 would have been within the city manager's approval authority. With that, Mayor and Council, any questions?
All right, you've heard the report of the Public Works Director. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul?
Dr. Kelly.
I move approval of agenda item 2024-075, approval of change order 2 to the existing contract with Reedwick LLC as it relates to the public safety fiber project, and for the city manager to execute the same.
I have a motion by Dr. Kelly. Is there a second? Second. Been moved by Dr. Kelly, seconded by Mr. Paulson, that we approve agenda item 2024-075, the change order 2 to the existing contract with Reedwick LLC. Any discussion? Dr. Kelly.
You mentioned contract time extension policies.
Yes, ma'am. If you recollect, council had registered concerns with contract time as a part of the now under construction trail extension project. So we've reviewed when we take time extensions. We with purchasing have reviewed when we take time extensions to mayor and council. In this case, given the size of this contract time extension, we felt it best warranted that we vet the contract time extension with mayor and council for approval.
Okay. Have you all established sort of a threshold that triggers?
What we had discussed internally was 30 to 60 days would be allowable within the manager's purview, in particular if it was less than $150,000. But because this is in effect 6 months, well, it's 120 days, we felt that it was better to bring it to you. But we will have a change to our financial policies once we finalize what that needs to be.
Okay, well, is that the kind of thing that would be brought before us?
The financial policies, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Okay, so I'll be looking out. Thank you.
Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Marty, just a quick question. They're conducting a fiber audit. What if they don't like what they find? Is there additional monies to make this thing work?
So the fiber audit, 280 pair fiber that runs through. So the fiber audit as well is to understand where within that 280 pairs what's available to use to address the new facility from here. So it's as well an assessment of the fiber to address each of those individual fibers.
Not necessarily a capacity question.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The capacity's there. It's just what do you use within the capacity?
Any other discussion? And Ms. Mueller.
And so, Marty, these change orders will not impact the projects that are underway in any way, the fleet, because it's going to be opening soon, right? A couple of
In
months,
this case, they
everything now.
facilitate them, is what we believe. It was
Okay.
somewhat late identified requirement to get fleet facility tied in, but it moves it in the most expeditious manner to facilitate connectivity
So
to the fleet
no
building.
impact to either any of those, the timeline for those projects?
This should
Shouldn't.
glove in with
Okay.
those.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Questions on agenda item 2024-075, approving the change order 2 to the existing contract with Reedwick LLC relating to the public safety fiber project and for the city manager to execute the same. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. That winds up our official business for this evening. A couple of things. The legislature adjourned. It was 40 days and about an hour. They didn't get through till 1 o'clock on Friday morning. Though there was a discussion about whether what was the definition of a day. Is it midnight to midnight, or if you start at 10 o'clock, does it allow you to go to 10 o'clock the next day? Well, like good politicians, they reach a compromise and went to 1. So there are a few bills that we had some concerns about. I'll give you a quick overview of those. Most of the bills dealing with municipal government, particularly the ones that we had concerns with, did not get passed. There were some positive things that came out of it. One is that they raised the cap on sales tax to giving municipalities and county governments an extra penny in return for reducing their millage rate. So you have to reduce the millage rate, then you would call a referendum to have the extra penny sales tax. So that if the governor signs, it will be available. I think most of you know that I was on the task force with the Georgia Municipal Association, Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, looking at the service delivery strategy law in Georgia. Sandy Springs has been in business for 18 years, and we've never had a service delivery agreement in Fulton County during that whole time, largely because of the fight between Atlanta and Sandy Springs over the water system. This makes a number of changes to the SDS, and that's something that we'll begin probably fairly soon. Right now, there are 30 jurisdictions that have SDS issues, haven't resolved their SDS, and to this point, the Department of Community Affairs has not issued any sanctions. This bill requires them to issue sanctions if, after 6 months of negotiation, there is no service delivery strategy. Well, what are those sanctions? You will not be eligible for any state grants or any federal grants that are administered through the state. You will not be able to get any state-issued permits during that time. So it's a hammer, and it's a pretty significant hammer. So it's designed to force people who've just been kind of blithely going along and not adhering to the SDS requirements, to force them to get serious about negotiating settlements. You can only imagine that I was one of the major voices arguing that these sanctions need to be applied. Otherwise, a lot of these things will never get addressed. And so with the governor signs this bill, and there's no reason to believe that he won't, we start having to have serious negotiations about who delivers. The SDS law is a great law. It makes sure that there's no duplication of services. The counties and the cities work out who's delivering what service to whom, who's paying for them, and what sources of money are being paid for with. And so when you don't have an SDS, there's all kinds of problems about who's doing what services and who's paying for them and who's actually getting them. So it's a good law. I think the legislature has made very strong changes that will hopefully make it work. So I think that's a positive. A lot of us were concerned about short-term rentals. The short-term rental legislation failed. So there's no changes in that. It would have grandfathered all short-term rentals that were in existence before we passed any ordinances. We could not apply our ordinances to people who had been involved in a short-term rental program prior to the enactment of our ordinances, and we know there are several out there. It would have complicated our ability to regulate, particularly the party houses. Good news is Senate Bill 443 did pass, and it allows cities to recover costs of party houses and other unpermitted events that cause a public nuisance. So we can now collect money in fines and levies when we have those situations. It gives us another tool to deal with it. We're going to have to take a look at this next one to see what it's going to do to our property tax revenue. The legislature has raised the statewide homestead exemption from $7,500 to $20,000. That's a significant increase. And there were a lot of property tax bills that were enacted. There is a statewide floating cap of 3% or this consumer price index. The state now has adopted the Sandy Springs ordinance that we've been operating under for a long time. This will apply across the state, so that will have some impact on other jurisdictions, not so much us. There was HB 946 that revises T-SPLOST. As of right now, all the cities, let's take Fulton County for an example, all the cities in Fulton County have to agree to the T-SPLOST, or it's 75%, isn't it? 75%, not all. 75% must agree to having calling for a T-SPLOST vote, referendum. This changes the number to 50%. So, for example, Atlanta and Sandy Springs, having 50% of the population in Fulton County, could call for a T-SPLOST referendum. There have been several jurisdictions where they've had difficulty getting that done, so they've raised it. We have not had a problem in Fulton County. I use that as an example, not as an example of how it's gone wrong, because I think we've done a very good job. One that Wendell Willard would really be proud of, our former city attorney, not getting as far as that he would like, but HB 1149 requires that all constitutional officers, of which the tax collector is one, must now must report any outside income related to their official duties. So we'll at least know how much money that people are making when they're collecting our taxes going forward on all the citizens of Fulton County and other counties across the state. That's kind of a quick highlight of the legislation that was there. There was a lot. You can go to the Georgia Municipal Association website, their government affairs. You may get the Gold Dome report. It has a whole list of all the bills that came out. Mr. DiGiulio. it shouldn't be tied up in court at all, because it really takes away the judge's ability to issue stays. That was one of the things that we kind of insisted, that if you're going to have a hammer, somebody has to be able to wield it. And the courts have seen the impact of no federal and state grants, no federal state permits as being draconian. And so they have issued stays, and many of them have gone on, as in our case, for over 20 years. And so the legislature said enough is enough. We're going to fix this so that if we're either going to repeal the SDS law, which they're not going to do because everybody agrees it's a very good law, or we're going to make people live up to it. And so that's it. Starts within, what happens is we all have to do a 10-year update, our plan, 10-year plan. Remember, we do our 10-year plan. Once the county, of course, unfortunately, Fulton County does a 20-year plan. I'm not sure exactly what the benefit of a 20-year plan is, but anyway, once the 10-year plan has been adopted, that starts the clock running, and then you've got deadlines to be able to get that done. So it will make this process move. It actually, the law has always had teeth, but it's been defanged. The legislature just put the fangs back in. So is that a fair assessment? Okay.
6 months starts when you give notice to everybody, we start the negotiation.
Right.
Any one party can do it. That starts the clock running.
But it has to be done right. I mean, no later than if you pass your 10-year plan, then it has to. That starts the clock too. So
Mayor Paul, question on this subject: if there's litigation in the middle of one of these SDSs, does the litigation stay off the 6-month enforcement requirement? I mean, because it's in litigation, does it apply,
I don't
or
think
does it all
so.
apply?
You know, Dan and I have had some conversations about, does this law apply to the new SDS or the one that we're still working on from 2010? I think it's immaterial because we've got to do a new one anyway, and so that will start the process. I mean, Dan?
That's right, and the litigation we're in is about now, and so that would be the previous service delivery strategy agreement. This new law requires that we have a new one. So the issue is, are we going to do this again? I hope that our counterparts in Atlanta can agree on the issue of water. It will, whatever we decide or the court decides on it, will carry forward to the new one, so that we'll have all the other issues to deal with and not that one issue. That's the goal
this
anyway.
is going to be very painful for everybody when these sanctions hit. And so hopefully that will have the result that the legislature intended, is to get people serious about working these issues out. And it's not just us. It's not just us in Atlanta. There are a number of jurisdictions across the state that have had ongoing, long-time disputes over service delivery strategy. It's going to force everybody to get serious about complying with this law. There is mediation, and there is also non-binding arbitration that are parts of this. There's no binding arbitration because the courts ruled that by delegating these decisions to a arbitrator, we have forsaken our legislative responsibility for doing this. So you can't delegate that responsibility. Only you, as the council, can make certain decisions, particularly when it comes to money. And so so the Supreme Court has basically said, you're the final decision makers about how we spend money. You can't delegate that. So that was unconstitutional. So.
Based upon your reading of the law and the negotiations down there, when do you think we can finally get an agreement? How long do you think it's going to take us?
Well, the governor signs it by the middle of May, and that will kind of start a clock running. And then you may, I mean, I think it'll be before the end of this year.
The effective date will be July 1.
Yeah. And then, so by the end of the year, we pretty much have to have something resolved. And the courts are aware of this new legislation too. So that's going to put the onus on anybody that's hearing a case right now to try and resolve any disputes that may exist. I hope. That's the goal.
Mayor, the sanctions, are they just against the two parties? Or
Yes.
still against-
Before, this was something that I insisted on. Before it applied, let's just use our example. Atlanta and Sandy Springs can't agree on water service strategy. Under the old law, Fulton County and every city in Fulton County would have had sanctions. In my opinion, just because two parties are in dispute, the parties who have no control, no leverage, no ability to affect the outcome would be punished equally to the two or more parties that can't agree. And so when we were drafting, when we were negotiating with ACCG and GMA, I insisted that it should only be the disputed parties that are sanctioned. So that, I mean, if you can't control what two other people do, you shouldn't be sanctioned because of their inability to agree. So that was a change in the law. Any others? All right, that's all I've got. Anybody else got anything? All right, we do need an executive, at least a short executive session tonight. So,
Mayor Paul.
First, let me ask, any staff reports? I didn't think so. All right, Mr. Paulson.
I move that we suspend regular order and move into executive session for the purposes of litigation and real estate.
Mr. Paulson moves that we suspend regular order and go into executive session. Is there a second? Moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the move to go into executive session. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. We are in executive session. There will be no further business conducted this evening. We will simply return to regular order, and then adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much. It's going to hit us hard, but it's going to hit them a lot worse because they have to have a lot more permit. My job is to make sure there's a red cone.
Mayor Paul, I move that we close out executive session back in regular order.
All right, let me get to the right page here.
Yeah, get it right.
All right, I'm on the right page. Mr. Paulson moves that we end the executive session and return to regular order. Is there seconded by Mr. DiGiulio? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Mr. DiGiulio. Mr. DiGiulio moves adjournment. Mr. Paulson seconds it. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
He was patient.